There you go.
and action.
All right, lesson 24.b, combining functions. If we have functions, as you hopefully recall, have names. Usually the name of any given function is a single letter. And we usually use the letter F to stand for a function. That's good.
That's
Okay.
smart. I didn't
Yeah.
even thought of that.
Excellent. Good. Yeah. So let's say we have a function, call it f of x. And usually if we have more than one function, we just start using subsequent letters in the alphabet. So if we have f of x and we have another function, we'll just call it g of x, just because that's the next letter. And let's say we add those two functions together. We can call the new combined function, or the new added function, or the f plus g of x. In function notation, by the way, these parentheses do not mean multiplication. You are not multiplying f times x. Every year it seems like a couple students get confused about that. Some get it, some don't, but in case you were going to be one of the people who was planning on getting confused by this, please scrap those plans and don't do that. In function notation, these parentheses do not mean multiplication. So, function f of x plus function g of x gives us the combined function of f plus g of x. We can do the same thing subtracting functions, f of x minus g of x. If we put those two functions together, we can have the f minus g of x. We can multiply functions together, and that we would call that function fg of x. And we can divide functions, and we write it like this. Now, we can also, what's called the composition of functions, we can plug one function into another function. So the idea here is, if we plug an x into the f function, and then whatever comes out of that we plug into the g function, it's like we take an x, and f it, and then
That's
g
on
it.
the video.
What?
That's on the video.
What is?
Just a bunch of letters.
So, this would be the g of the f of x. This is a lot of parenthesis type of action, so we can also write this as the g, a little circle, the g of f of x. Let's try to make it x, there we go. So the g of f of x.
Just the top, right, left.
And by the same token, what if we did it in the other order? If we plug an x into the g function, and then we plug that output into the f function, then that would be, we would be taking an x and finding the g of x, and then we f that. So we would write that as the f of g of x.
Should we write this down?
If the notation is clear to you without you making a special note to yourself, then you don't have to write it down. If you are not sure whether you will understand what the math book says later, then you probably should write this down.
Can we take
I understand
pictures?
how you get those. It's just, what's the point of them?
It's just showing you what the notation is. If you have two functions and you need to put them together, either add them together, subtract one from the other, multiply them, divide one by the other, or plug one into the other one, it just gives you some notation for that. All right, so let's run through a couple examples here.
Pear. Oh.
Pear?
Elmer's like a kid.
Did someone say pear?
I say pear.
All right, so example 24.5. If we have function f of x, which means log of x, meaning that whatever we plug in to this function, we're going to take the log of that.
What's the log?
Logarithm?
What's that?
Oh,
Log?
what is logarithm?
It's a big word.
Never heard of it.
Have
Okay.
we covered this?
No.
No.
Are you serious?
No.
Yep.
Quite serious. Wait, is that little button?
Log X.
What in the
Can you
world?
please
Okay,
explain to us?
Oh, it's on here.
so apparently lesson 26 is where they go into that. Well, that's
Genius.
silly.
I had one job.
Well, for the moment, pretend you know what log means.
Yeah, I know it.
That little button on the
Yes, there is a button on the calculator for it. Good job. Now, the function g of x is x squared plus 6. So what this is saying is that if I plug in some number for the x, if I plug in, just a quick example here, if I take the g of 2, What that means is plug in a 2 for the x wherever it is over here. So I'm plugging a 2 for the x, and then I'm squaring it, plus 6. And so that's 4 plus 6, that's a 4. And so then this equals 10.
So y,
No,
What?
yeah.
so y equals 10.
Instead of y, it's g of
Okay.
x. It's the same idea, yes, it's the
And it would
exact
never
same
be
idea,
y.
just a different notation.
It would never be y, right? It would be yx. Or the f of x, or the y
This
of
is
x, or
function,
the g
this is
of
the
x.
function notation for this idea.
It's just telling you the name of it,
That's a y.
Oh, y equals the function of something?
of whatever the part.
So like f of x equals y?
Almost all the time, yeah.
Okay.
There can be some exceptions, but basically, at least to get the idea, when you see f of x, you can think of y.
Wait, so.
G of x as well, right?
Uh-huh.
And anything
Whatever
of
of
x.
x, any function of x.
Did we just pick a random number for
Wait,
X?
how can
Yeah.
I
y?
did just now, I just wanted to show you what you do here. Okay, so, example 24.5 asks, find the g of f of x. So, g of f of x means that we are going to, that we're taking the g of the f of x. So, we take the f of x,
Why can't
which is log x, and we're going to plug this in. So we're going to find the f of log x. And you actually don't have to understand logs in order to do this problem. So the g of, oops, sorry, that should have been a g. The g of the f of x means we're going to take this and we're going to do this to it. We're going to take that log of x and square it, and then add 6, and that is what the g of f of x is, and so there is, we've answered the question.
How come from that you said find g of x times x, or g times f times x?
Yeah, that little, that's not a dot, that's a little circle, and that, so this is saying the g of f of x.
Okay, so why can't you do, f times,
F of g of x?
So
Yeah.
that's your answer.
You could, but that's not what this question was asking for,
how do we know what it was asking for?
because it said in,
Where does it say it?
in the example 24.5,
Yeah, I'm looking at it, I just don't understand.
find g of f of x.
G of f of x, why can't you flip it around?
So that's the answer?
I don't know. it doesn't-
Because it makes a difference, are we taking the f of x first and then plugging it into the g function? Or are we taking the g of x first and then plugging it into the f function?
I don't know.
G of f of x means we're finding the g of the f of x. So we have to, what we plug into the g function, what we're plugging into the g function is whatever the f function is. That probably didn't help a whole lot.
I just don't understand what G stands for and F stands for and X and how it all.
X is
I
a
know
variable.
X is
X is a variable, so it's
F
gonna
is
stand for some
function,
number.
and
Yeah.
I just don't
This-
understand how.
We have two functions here, we can't call them both function f. Otherwise, if I say f of x, you wouldn't know which one I'm talking about.
G is a.
So f is just the name of this function, and g is the name of this function, just so we can tell them apart.
Okay,
I could have called them functions h and q,
okay.
or
Layers.
any other letters.
Or
I could say
numbers.
layer. So, alright, 24.6.
Brown.
Sorry, purple one. Okay, so 24.6 gives us two functions. It calls this one f and it calls this one g. And it asks several questions. The first question that it asks is, find the f plus g of 6. So we're going to add function f and function g, and then plug in 6. So, let's do this. Let's find the f plus g of x. The f of x is x plus 2. So we're going to add function g of x, which is x squared plus 3.
How do you fix this?
Because they told us function g
Oh,
is this.
okay, got it.
Alright, Alright, so this is just all added together, so we could say, let's combine our like terms, and we have this. So f plus g of x equals this.
That's your answer, right?
Almost. But they wanted the f plus g of 6. So what we do now,
Red.
Brown.
what we do now is we, what we're going to do is,
Stupid color.
what we're going to do is we're going to plug in a 6 for the x.
Does it give you the 6 or did you just,
F.
Yes.
If
It
F
wanted
is
to know what
six.
the f plus g of 6.
so 6 is x?
So we're plugging in the 6 for the x.
I'll get that.
So we have 6 squared plus 6 plus 5, which is 11, and we have 47. And so our answer to this would be 47.
So they will give us all three of those little equations there?
Well, if they're going to talk about function f and function g, they have to tell you what those functions are.
Okay, and then they will give you.
And then they'll have to ask a question. Say, what are you doing with those two functions? And if they want you to plug in a number to get a number, then they'll have to tell you what number to plug in.
Understood.
That's confusing.
Yeah, it's the function notation. It's not supposed to be complicated, but it's different from what you've done previously, and that's why. And I think just because it looks different, that's why it can be confusing. It's also more confusing if you're talking and not paying attention. But that's
We're talking about that actually. I was
Okay.
talking about how easy it was to just look instead of having to listen and do the explanation. That really
well,
explains.
good. Well, some people need the explanation, so make sure you're not distracting those people.
Like what? Is he even on the screen?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, no, not him.
Purple. Green.
Okay, so this example is asking several questions. This was the first question. Let's do.
Oh, there's more?
Here, I'm gonna move this over here just to make some space. And then it asks. Then it asks for the f minus g of 6. Oh, I wanted to show you something else. While we're still on this one. The f plus g of 6. I'm showing this to you because sometimes it'll be easier to work this way, sometimes it's easier to work this way. The f plus g of 6, you can also get there by finding the f of 6 and adding the g of 6.
Mr. Green, can you go to the office real quick? My mom is there.
Sure, you're going to need to pass though. Can you pause it, please?
Pause.
Stop.
Okay.